And so that first chapter you could really summarize in how valuable is faith. We oftentimes look at faith and we look at our daily lives and we look at the things that we consider valuable. And faith isn't something we put on our assets list. If you're adding up a total of all the things that you have of any value here on earth, you say, well, I've got a house, or I've got a car, or I have, maybe I have some tools, or whatever it is. You wouldn't normally put faith on that list. And yet, 1 Peter chapter 1, he said, in the end, when all those other things are gone, faith is the only thing that will really matter. Faith will be what's left. And so, suffer because it makes a great and valuable faith. Then in chapter 2, he talked about as you live faithfully here on this planet and live as Christ would have you to live, you're being built into a house. And he says you're being built on that chief cornerstone, which is Jesus. And Jesus is the cornerstone that everybody else rejected. If you think about the Old Testament Jewish nation, they were given a job by God. From the very beginning, all the way back to Moses, when they first got the law, they were given one job. And that job was to live faithfully unto God, waiting for the Christ. That's the only thing they had to look for. That was their job. You wait for the Christ to show up. And then when he did show up, they rejected him. And he says that he compares it in chapter 2 there to the idea of a bunch of builders, and a bunch of builders get they're looking for the best rock to build a foundation out of, and the chief cornerstone, the one that you're going to build the whole thing off of, shows up, and they reject it. The only rock that really matters, they reject. And he says, your life is being built off of him. Then as we go further into chapter 2, we get down to verse 11. And in verse 11, he's going to now begin to talk about how your life of suffering can change everybody else's life. So we've talked about suffering changing your life in that it strengthens your faith, it makes you a better person, it builds you on the foundation of Christ. But now here, we're going to look at how it changes others' lives when you suffer faithfully. So let's start here in verse 11 and just get the context. Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims. That's language he's used time and time again. People who wander this earth. This world is not your home. Abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. There's the whole key to verse 11 through 17. And in fact, it's a theme that we're going to continue to see carried into chapter 3, but especially verse 11 through verse 17, is that the way that we live, even when we're treated and spoken of as evildoers. You notice what it says there in verse 12, when they speak against you as evildoers, not that you have done evil, but they speak ill of you. So that even when the world is against you, even when people persecute you with their lips, even when they drag you off to prison or they throw you to the lions or any number of things that the saints of the first century did face, even when they do that, your good works would cause them to glorify God in the day of visitation. That day of visitation is the day when each man is visited by God. You could look at that as either being the judgment day, or you could look at that like the man who built bigger barns, and God said, today, this day, your soul will be required of you. In other words, you thought you had more time here on this earth, but no, you're going to meet your Maker today. Today you're going to die. That's the point here is, live as you live in this world. If you live faithfully and stand up under suffering, then you will have an opportunity to impact other people so that they will glorify God, and hopefully the honest ones will come to Christ. And so he lists here in verse 11 through 17 just a checklist of things that you can do to make an impact on others. So keeping in mind here, the people we're dealing with really are people who oppose you, your enemies, people who are not your friends, people who do not treat you well, people who have bitterness in their heart towards you, or a grudge, or just people who wake up on the wrong side of the bed and treat you poorly. Everything from the casual rudeness that you see in the world to that very concerted meanness that some people have towards you. And so as he lists these different things, these are not things you just do towards people who are in the world but somewhat friendly to you. These are the things that you do when you're loving your enemy as well. First of all, he says, abstain from fleshly lusts. He points out in verse 11, before you even address how you treat others, abstain from fleshly lusts. You cannot in any way... Wow, my cell phone just went off. Now it's on vibrate. You cannot in any way teach a class. If your cell phone goes off, you've lost them all. You can't make any difference with other people if your life is just caught up in lust. That's the number one thing. It is just absolutely impossible to make any sort of difference with other people when your life is just a total train wreck. And doesn't that make sense? We even have sayings like clean up your own house first, right? And so here he says, before we deal with anybody else, you have to deal with those fleshly lusts that war against your soul. So if you have some deep sin in your life, you're going to have to get rid of that. You're going to have to look in the mirror and look at those thorns that are in your side. Look at those logs that are in your eye. Remember what Christ said on the subject? If you've got a log in your eye, can you pull the speck out of your brother's? You can't even see straight to pull it out of his. So first of all, abstain from fleshly lust. And really, as you look at the church today, this is one of the number one things that hampers us from proper evangelism. It is just simply that the world has so many nets out there to grab us, and we fall for them. And the more we're caught up in our own problems and our own sins, the less capable we are of making a difference in others. And so first of all, abstain from fleshly lusts, and then he says, have your conduct honorable among the Gentiles. And I have up here, live a beautiful life, because that's really what that says. When it says, let your conduct be honorable, that word for honorable there, some of your versions will say, let your conduct be honest. That word is kalos, and it means beautiful. And so if you were to read it in the most literal sense, it's have your conduct be beautiful among the Gentiles. But that's kind of an odd way to say things, so they try and pick another word that has the same feel to it. But really what we're talking about is living a life of beauty. Now, not physical beauty, not talking about the clothes you wear, but the character that your life consists of. That you would be the kind of person who is honest and reputable, who's friendly, who's good, who does all of these things that really are pleasing to God, so that when other people look at you, they see a beautiful life. And that's what we want. We want to live our lives in such a way that not only are we living away from sin, abstaining from those fleshly lusts, but we're also living in such a way that that others say, that's the kind of life I want. You know, we're living happy lives. A happy person is a beautiful person, aren't they? I mean, doesn't matter how much makeup a woman is wearing. If she's scowling, she is not pretty, is she? A smile, that countenance of happiness, of joy, rejoice in the Lord always, those sorts of things, that's part of what he's talking about here, that our conduct, our everyday behavior should be honorable among the Gentiles. Now the word there for Gentiles, that just means nations. And so the point there is, as you're amongst all the rest of mankind, don't just be happy amongst the saints. Don't just live a good life amongst the saints. Don't just put your good Sunday face on, so to speak, would be the way we might put it. Live it every day so that everybody would see those things. The next thing he points out is down in verse 13. He says, therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. one of the hardest things for a Christian to do is to submit to somebody who they don't believe is qualified to submit to. And he's going to talk quite a bit more about that with servants, with wives, submitting to people who you think made a wrong call. Now, how many times do you see in government them make a wrong call? Oh, just like all the time, right? It's just normal. Now, this is not just an American problem. This isn't just something that you see all of a sudden, hey, here it is, just America. We're the first ones on the planet to ever have politics be an issue. Politics have always been associated with problems, corruption, people doing things that are wrong. And that rightfully so bothers us as Christians. It is right for a Christian to be irked by injustice and corruption and all these things we see in the government. Our government, if you move over to China, you're going to see it in China's government. You move to Australia, you're going to see it in Australia's government. You're going to see it anywhere you go. And it's right for us to be bothered by it, but what does God say to do in issues that are not moral issues? What does He say to do? Submit. Be a good citizen. You know, one of the things that drives me nuts is like you take those traffic cameras. You know, they drive me nuts in the city. I've got one right outside, and it's not even a normal school anymore. It's the Leaders for Learning building right off of Main Street. And you know how that light flashes whenever it's school hours? And so those cameras are watching, and whenever that light flashes, they say there are children present, therefore you got to drive at the speed limit is 20. See if I get it right. Well, it is 20, isn't it? 20 miles an hour or under. Well, here's the problem. The one out there on Main Street, the light flashes at the weirdest hours, and there's nobody. So common sense tells me there are no children present, so guess how I should just drive? Just drive however I normally drive. Yeah, just 75. Just drive normal. But it says that light's flashing. Common sense tells me it's no big deal, but what does the law say? Drive at 20. Now, that's just a dumb example, but it's one that really bugs me. Those are ones that bug me. Building permits. Don't even get me started on building permits. But are these moral things? What speed limit you drive? Whether you get a permit to, put in an outlet or something like that. Are these moral things? No. These are government things. And he says, submit to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. Now, when it says every, does that mean everyone that we like? I wish. I've looked. No, it's not that. It's just every. Now, if you go over and you look at the Romans account on it, part of the point of that is so that people would look at you and they couldn't even say he's a bad citizen. They can't even say, well, he may be a good guy, but he breaks the laws all the time. They can't even say that. The point here is that man might glorify God. And you and I know that there are plenty of rules that the U.S. government has that have nothing to do with morals. But if somebody says, Scott, he breaks the law all the time, what's that sound like? It sounds bad, doesn't it? Whether I break moral laws or not, they still say, oh yeah, Scott, he doesn't care about the rules, he just breaks the laws. Okay, that's the point here. Submit yourselves to the ordinance of man, for whether to the king is supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. So we'll take praise wherever we can get it. We're here to glorify Christ, to glorify His kingdom. So I'll take praise wherever I can get it. And he says, if you do good, the government will praise you, in that you will not be counted amongst the evildoers. And so he says, for this is the will of God, that by doing good, you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. That's our whole point in doing good, is to silence any arguments that would get in the way of the real argument. Now you think about it. If you're talking with somebody and you're trying to talk to them about things that matter, what's the conversation you really want to have with every human being that you ever come in contact with? What's the one important thing you want to talk to them about? It's Christ, isn't it? That's the only important conversation that you really need to have with as many people as you can possibly have. But if every time they look at you, they see an anger problem, or they see somebody who's got a speeding problem, or they see somebody who is living a life that isn't beautiful, an unhappy life, where they're the type of person who their conduct isn't always upright. All of those things are going to get in the way of having the one conversation you really want to have. And so the idea is remove anything that's going to cause any problems. Remove anything that would hinder you from talking about what really matters. Silence all of those arguments. Anybody have any comments or questions on that? Okay. And then he says, down in verse 16, as free, that is, living as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. You as a Christian have freedom. Meaning you wake up in the morning and you don't have to worry about some of the things that other people do. You don't have to worry about what tomorrow's going to look like, because God says you just take care of today, because tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. You don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about what happens when you die. You've got hope. You don't have to worry about your finances. God says you seek first the kingdom, I'll take care of all these things. So you can live a free and happy-go-lucky life. And he says, but here's the thing. As a Christian, you've got this freedom. You've got this joy, this new lease on life. You're not weighted down with the burdens that so many others are. Don't use that freedom as a cloak for vice. Don't go out and say, oh, well, I know God loves me, so I'll just go live as I please. Use that freedom to be a servant. So as you look at life, there's so many things that God's told you, don't worry about that. That's not your problem. Don't worry about that. That's not your problem. This thing over here, that's my problem. Don't you worry about that. Okay, so what do I need to worry about? Just serving God. So as you live every single day of your life, use your freedom to serve. This is one of the things that we tend to not do. When somebody gets a big boon financially, somebody gets a whole lot of money, they have a great uncle who dies and gives them $1 million or something like that. What is our tendency as human beings? Is it to take that extra money that we didn't have yesterday, weren't even counting on yesterday, and all of a sudden we say, oh, here's this extra money. I have all this extra money. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that money that I didn't need anyways, and I'm now going to use it to help everybody else. Is that what we tend to do? No. Now, all of a sudden what happens is we get this newfound freedom and prosperity and luxury, and we start spending it on ourselves. And that's what the tendency is. And he says, you've been given that spiritually. You've been given all of these spiritual blessings. Don't be stingy. Use your freedom to be a servant of others, because that's how God intends for us to live. And then he says, verse 17, honor all men. Give every human being. This is not a small statement. It's 3 words, but it is a huge, huge principle. Honor all men. All men includes friends, enemies, strangers, family, everybody. Honor all men. That word for honor is the word we use to put somebody on a pedestal. When you give somebody an honor, you place them above others. You go to the Olympics and they give a guy a gold medal, and where does he stand on the podium? Top step. They give him this much over the guy who has silver, don't they? It's not much, is it? Just about this much. But what does standing here versus standing here do? That's honor. That's all it is. This guy has 6 inches of less honor than this guy. Silver, gold. That's what honor means. Put him in the gold position. So in every human being that you interact with, give them honor. Not because they deserve it. That's not what it says there. Honor all men who deserve it. That's not what it says. It simply says honor all men. Give every human being a position of honor, of rank in your life, so you treat them really better than they deserve. Because if you honored all men that deserved it, how many men would you honor? How many people would you honor? None deserve it. So if you honor everybody, you're giving everybody something they don't deserve. And so as you live life, he said, this is one of the things that will make you stand out. Is that you run into somebody who's a mean, nasty person and you treat them nicely anyways. You run into somebody who's got bitterness and a grudge in their heart and you smile and you shake their hands and you say, hey, how you doing anyways? Because that's part of your character. Christians stand out because we love others who are not very lovable. And so honor all men. And whenever you you honor all, whenever you treat all people with kindness, you're going to run into people who bite the hand that feeds them. Who you give them that position of greatness in your life, you treat them well, and they don't reciprocate. But you just keep on doing it. Then he says, love the brotherhood. Now honor all men, but then he says, now with the brotherhood, make sure to give them love. Now does that mean you don't love all men? The Bible says love even your enemy. What's the point here? Honor all men, love the brotherhood. We're putting an extra emphasis on the brotherhood. It's the same as the verse says, it says, do good to all, but especially those of the household of faith. Do good to anybody you have a chance to do good to, but especially make sure that you treat the brotherhood well. Because they are a different kind of family. The brotherhood are the people who you will spend eternity with. Everybody else is people you hope you can spend eternity with. You want them to join the brotherhood. But give them a special position of love and adoration in your heart. Do good to all, but especially the household of faith. And so love the brotherhood. Then it says, fear God. Now we went from 3 words that was a big deal down to 2 words that's a big deal. Honor all men, 3 words. Fear God, 2 words. In everything you do, give God reverence. All that language that our world uses every single day that in any way cuts God low, whether it be things like, oh my God, or it be just simply the texting version of it, OMG. What does that do? It simply takes and doesn't give God enough reverence. It takes a name that deserves the highest pedestal ever and it cuts it low. So watch your lips. Watch how you talk about Him. Watch how you treat Him. When it comes down to making decisions in life, God comes at the top of the priority list. He's number 1. And when you do that, that means other people, they're going to be lower on the list. And that might even upset people sometimes. You go to an employer and you tell them, I'm sorry, but you're number 2 on the list. There's a lot of employers that say, no, I don't want to be that spot. We're paying your wage. You should put us up here. No, I'm sorry. You go to your spouse and you say, and some people have to do this. I'm very, very thankful that I'm married to a faithful woman. But if you have to with your spouse, they're vacillating about their Christianity or they're an unbeliever, you just say, look, whatever you're going to do, I'm going to be at services. I'm going to do what God says. Because I fear God more than I fear you. More than I have reverence for God more than I have reverence for my spouse or my children or my friends or anything like that. Yes, sir?
It's an attitude that's like important because a lot of times Christians be like, well, maybe I can skirt by. Maybe like they look for loopholes in the Bible, like
right.
Say I do this, but like maybe like I don't have to do this so much. Like they're not looking to serve God at the best, they're looking to serve God at the bare minimum.
Right.
That's not what serving God is about. Fearing God is about putting Him in reverence, honoring all these people, honoring Him, and not thinking, well, maybe I can do this, and hopefully I can do this, like trying to get by, but like just doing, well, if I'm not sure if I can do this, I won't do that. I'll just give God the reverence and say, I'm not going to do that.
Yep, that's exactly it. If you're thinking in terms of the bare minimum, you're thinking, the whole thought process is backwards. And Christ was real clear on that. What does a man have to give up to serve me? Take up your cross and follow after me. It's not like a kind of sort of thing. Leave it all and follow me. So yeah, absolutely. It's a mindset we're talking about here. So fear God, and then it says it again, honor the king.